Hi guys, for this video, which is a continuation of my brief lectures on issues related to research methodology, I want to discuss the topic of research questions. Now, this is one of the things that I personally have found very confusing, mainly because when I went around asking many departments like the missions department and the pastoral departments and the theology departments, biblical studies, they each seem to have a different understanding of what a research question is and how it is to be applied in their research. And so, rather than provide the definition of research questions and how to do it, I'm going to provide instead what you can call a range of meanings, that how research questions can be understood depending on departments. And this is actually my interpretation. I still don't know for certain how every faculty or every department understands and applies this. So don't take my word for it, but I think what I'm saying could help at least get us started in thinking about research questions as different depending on which department you come from. Okay, so I'm going to take the research questions. In fact, I think there are three types of understandings of research questions, and that's something that I'll talk about. The first kind of research questions are the questions that come from the empirical based disciplines. This includes pastoral theology, missions, and to some extent religions. These disciplines or specializations tend to focus on getting to ground research, field research. The idea is that what is happening in the field, what is happening in my context. Now, this kind of research where you don't know what you're going to get when you go to field research. You might think that you're entering the field and to prove one point, but actually it could be something else, because you can't be sure how people are going to answer your questions or how the context, the social context really is. You can have some presuppositions about it. You can think that they will probably answer this way, but the whole point of an empirical research, to get data from the field, is to get unique perspectives about what actually is happening in the field. And that is something, the reason why we do that is because people don't know for sure. If we all knew it, then we wouldn't need to get statistics or data from the field. So the research questions here play a very, very important role, and it basically sets the tone of your field research. It basically says, it guides you in terms of what are you trying to find out when you go out to research. But it's not simply a research question that is like, what are you going to research? It's not a topic. Neither is it a perspective. I am, do Christians, I'm just thinking of some issue. Do Christians baptize by immersion or by sprinkling? Because that's a very close question. It's like, do Christians do that? Yes, some Christians do, some Christians don't. It's a very easy question to be answered without even any research. A good research question that is worthy of field research would be something like, why do some Christians baptize through immersion, and why do others baptize by sprinkling? And that question, which is a why question in the sense of it's worth finding out, you don't actually know the exact reasons, that can direct your field research. You can find out sociological reasons, you can find out interviews, you can find out through talking to the church leadership, so on and so forth. Now again, this is not the best research question, nor is it the best example, but I hope you can understand that in empirical research, to find out what you're trying to find out is of central importance. And so the research question will be really important there. So if you who are watching this video come from an empirical based discipline, in the sense of pastoral practical theology, missions and religions, or even if you do theology from an empirical perspective, any question that any research that you're going to do from an empirical perspective needs a very clear research question in the beginning. Now, I said that there were three kinds of research questions. So the second kind is the one that I tend to use, and that's the one that I tend to have this view, and so, but I'm not trying to promote it. I'm just trying to say that this describes how I'm in theology, and so therefore I think we theologians, or we from the theology disciplines, tend to define this. So the research questions emerge for us out of our problem statements. So now what do I mean by that? So let's say, for instance, I am going to discuss Christology, and means the study of Christ. And in the study of Christ, I find out a controversy between the idea of that the John's Gospel is very different from Mark's Gospel. Actually, that's a biblical studies research question. Okay, cancel that. Okay, okay. What would be a theological one? Christology would be, let's say, for instance. Okay, let me just be simplistic here. Contextual Christology, something that comes from India. There's a difference between the Indian theologians' view of Christ and the Western traditional view of Christ. And there is this controversy between how Indian Christians, especially during the independence era, rejected the Western church view of Christ. They saw him as much more personal and yet at the same time much more important than anything else. In fact, they prioritized Christ above all things, including above the Bible. Whereas traditional Christianity has tended to see Christ alongside the Bible in the sense that Christ is not so high to the cost of anything else. There is a church, and you must be faithful to the church, or you must be faithful to the doctrines, or you must be faithful to the belief in Christ, or you must be faithful to the larger superstructure. Whereas Indian theologians rejected the superstructure and said we only follow Christ. We don't even follow the Bible, or we don't even follow the doctrines. I mean, not that they didn't follow the Bible, but they basically said that above Christ there can be nothing else. Now there seems to be this controversy, especially in the 1940s in Indian theology. So contextual theology of Christ and the Western traditional theology of Christ, this controversy. Now if I was to do a paper on that, I would first establish that there is this problem. And so because I've done the research, I can say, okay, there is a problem between these two views of Christ. But now what is my research question? My research question, or even my research questions, will emerge out of this problem. So why do Indian theologians have a different view of Christ from traditional theology? And even what were the arguments that they used to why did they follow that view, and why, and what was their justification, and how did they justify it? So that would be one set of research questions. That could even be one chapter. So that would be one research question. But notice, I'm not going to go to the field with these questions. I've already read my books, and from that I'm going to, I've got my problem, and from that I'm going to get a question that will lead me back into those books with more focus. And the next set of research questions would be, what was the Western Christian response to them? So that would be, what was the debate? And the third research question can be, what should be our response to them? So therefore, looking at the Bible, for instance, or looking at contemporary theology, how should we view Christ? Now notice my research questions, which I've listed, can actually be divided into chapters. So my first research question leads me to my first chapter on Indian theology. My next research question gets me to the Western theology of that time. And my third research question about what should be our response gets to contemporary biblical and contemporary theological perspectives. So my research questions result from my problem that I have discovered, and also lead directly to the writing. So that's the second kind of research questions. Now the third kind of research questions, which I'm not very sure about, and this is what I heard one professor say this, so I'm just going to say it as one perspective. But a research question is a question that focuses your research. So it is the central question about your research. It defines your entire research. Now, some of you may have heard about my book, What is Religion? So something like that. that it would be a central question that defines your work. My work is to define what is religion. Like that, a central question of your work, for instance, let's take a biblical studies topic for instance and say, what is the meaning of the I am sayings in John's Gospel? So it's a central research question that defines the research to follow. There will be controversies within that, but it sort of is a very general question, but that question then defines the entire work, that all the work will be led to answering this one question. So that's a bit more general research question definition. Now, I would suggest that if you are caught confused about this, ask your own mentors or ask your own department heads, how important is the research question and how would you want to use it in terms of research papers as well as thesis proposals. The second view, which I promoted, is what we do in theology department. But depending on your own discipline, you could choose which one is relevant for you and use it accordingly. So I hope you found that helpful. I know it doesn't really answer what is a research question, but it gives a perspective of how we could, how that question is defined depending on which discipline you're in. So thanks.